Why limit yourself to file sharing, right?
For us as developers, we're like, what if you just did that everywhere? Like took that idea and applied to everything, databases, to communications, to everything. There's no reason why you limit yourself to files. You're just like boxing yourself in.
Robots and IoT and artificial intelligence are growing really rapidly, and we will have machine-to-machine payments, right? Robots will pay for stuff. Cars will pay, that are becoming more and more robots, will pay for stuff. Fridges are already paying for stuff. Light bulbs are buying their own electricity. It doesn't matter if an atomic bomb will wipe out your home. You have 24 words in your mind, and you'll get all your personal life fully backed up everywhere from these network peers.
Having worked in open source and making tons of that and software in the past, like that's a huge missing step in software. That's just like simple monetization.
We are seeing actually more and more users excited about Lightning payments.
Paolo Ardoino and Mathias Buus are the co-founders of Holepunch, a fully encrypted platform for building peer-to-peer applications. Matthias is the CEO who has been working on peer-to-peer apps for a decade, and Paolo is the CSO. He is also the CTO at Tether. In our discussion, Paolo and Matthias and I discussed exactly how Holepunch works, what it is built for. We discussed the benefits of using peer-to-peer apps and the costs and risks and trade-offs of relying on cloud data storage. We also discussed some of the ideas that developers could build using Holepunch and how those developers could monetize their businesses using stablecoins or Bitcoin on Lightning. Matthias and Paolo have both asked to have their share of today's show splits sent to the Human Rights Foundation. So if you enjoy this episode and if you learn something new, the best way you can support this show is by sending in sats over the Lightning Network using your favorite Podcasting 2.0 app. Before we get into today's show, this episode is sponsored by Voltage. Voltage is the industry standard and next generation provider of Lightning Network infrastructure. Today's show is also sponsored by Zebedee. Zebedee is your portal into the world of Bitcoin gaming. We'll have more from Voltage and Zebedee later in the show. Paolo and Matthias, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me today. I'm really excited to discuss the latest project you two have been working on called Holepunch, and Keet built on top of Holepunch. But before we get into it, why don't we start with both your backgrounds? If you could introduce yourselves to listeners and tell listeners more about what you've been working on in the past few years and why you're deciding to build peer-to-peer apps on Lightning now.
Matthias, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Mathias Buus. I'm a Danish guy. I've been involved with peer-to-peer my entire professional career, which is probably the last 10 years. It's always, you always forget a year because you get older, but I think it's around 10 years now. So I've been in the peer-to-peer open source space that long, building all kinds of experiments. I worked a lot with BitTorrent in the past, and I worked with Paolo the last many years on scalable peer-to-peer infrastructure, also for running, company infrastructure and stuff like that. So very excited to be here. I'm also a big JavaScript fan, and that's all I work with. And so excited to be here talking about peer-to-peer and everything we're doing.
Awesome. Paolo, I know you've got a long history in Bitcoin and Lightning, and why don't you give the listeners who aren't familiar with you just a background on your last few years?
Yeah, sure. I'm Paolo Ardoino. I'm CTO at Tether and Bitfinex, and CSO at Holepunch. I'm a developer since a really early age, and I've been focusing my life on scalable applications. So I was involved really early on high performance computing and distributed applications and so on and so forth. Then peer-to-peer is basically the natural progression. On when you think about distributed applications, actually peer-to-peer is the most pure natural progression that you can have, right? So is in a way feels like also from a pure ethos point of view, I like to consider myself a little bit an activist in that sense. Like I like to think that things, components should be symmetric in both in life, in society, and in the computer ecosystem, right? So in a way, it's like symmetry is one of the most important things. And, usually the client server model is not really symmetric, right? It's fully asymmetric. So I think that when it comes to Bitfinex, Matthias is completely right. We have been working together now since the last 5-6 years. I cannot even remember at this point. And we have been always, wondering, envisioning things together, right? And we brought a lot of actual peer-to-peer tech into Bitfinex as well, right? So Bitfinex backend was built on and is still currently built on top of microservices, but the microservices architecture that we built for Bitfinex, right? I coded a ton of that part directly, is actually built on more than 500 microservices today. And all those microservices actually are using the DHT to find each other. And this distributed hash table, I'm sure that we'll talk later about that. And it's actually one of the reasons why Matthias and us started talking heavily about it, because I was relying on some stuff that Matthias was contributing to, right? And one worked after the other, one thought at the other, and after many years, right? It's 3 years that actually we started seriously to work on or discuss about the Holepunch. It's not something like we waked up a few days ago and said, okay, this would be cool, Web3 is cool, and so on, right? It's something that has been brewing many years and has been something concrete for the last 3 years for us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to get into all the technical details of Holepunch in a second, but first I want to start with a different question, and that is, the Bitfinex and Tether family of companies, you guys have been on the front lines of peer-to-peer and Lightning for a while now. I mean, Lightning as a peer-to-peer app, right? Like you have recognized this as important before it has become consensus. Like a lot of people still in the crypto and Bitcoin space don't recognize Lightning. They don't recognize the need for peer-to-peer apps. You guys have. What have you recognized that other people have not clued into? Why are you guys deciding this is the right move when everyone else is focused on other things today?
So I will try to give you the polite answer. So let me explain you why, right? So you have two developers in this call. And as developers, right, so if we have to think to a really scalable payment system, you cannot imagine a scalable payment system to have a global state, to share a global state, right? So all these layer ones, Bitcoin, of course, cannot process billions of transactions per second. We all know that, right? And it's not even the scope of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's scope is to be a store of value, a way to share a global state that is slow, but is extremely secure, right? And on top of that, you have capabilities to build, layer 2 Lightning Network. But you see these layer 1 solutions like that. They claim they are super scalable, but their solution is to speed up the block time and trying to compress as much transaction as possible in one single block, and then have a global consensus across the entire globe. And the suggestion is that they can scale to hundreds of thousands or millions of transactions per second. Of course, it's nonsense, right? So because there is a limit of the speed of light, there is this limit, if you send a packet from Switzerland or Italy to Tokyo, it takes 150 milliseconds to 200 milliseconds. Imagine if you have a block time that is 500 milliseconds and you have to reach a global consensus. You have to reach places like in Africa and in other places that will need to hear about all the transactions included in the block, right? So, and also why we are even needing that type of global consensus, right? It's like pretending that, Kevin, your fridge is buying groceries for you, because nowadays the fridges are connected to internet, they can buy groceries, right? And I need to know that you are buying milk for your breakfast, right? Why? So the only meaningful and reasonable way to solve this problem is peer-to-peer, right? So you establish a channel between two parties, and this is with similar to peer, is exactly peer-to-peer, right? Is a socket. A channel is basically a socket, right? Is where two parties are exchanging information. Simple as that, right? So if I want to make 1 billion transactions with you, and only with you, because I'm like, you are Amazon and I'm buying a ton of stuff from you, right? Every second, and there are chargebacks, whatever, right? There is a continuous flow of monetary information that happens on a channel that is dedicated between the two of us, and that's it. That, if you think about it, then you can have a channel with Matthias, and then Matthias can have a channel with his friend, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the only reasonable way to scale stuff, right? All the other attempts are like smoke in the eye, in my opinion, because unless you beat the speed of light, you completely debunk relativity, and you go on like in the hyperspace and so on, then you cannot, the peer-to-peer solution in order to scale to mass adoption of payments is the only reasonable way. Also because, really quickly, I'm a really big sci-fi fan, and I believe that in the future, and apart from crypto, robots and IoT and artificial intelligence are growing really rapidly, and we will have machine-to-machine payments, right? Robots will pay for stuff. Cars will pay, that are becoming more and more robots, will pay for stuff. Fridges are already paying for stuff. Light bulbs are buying their own electricity. How the hell we are pretending to process all those billions probably of transactions, at least per second, if we don't have a pure peer-to-peer system? So that's one.
I love that. I like it. We're off to a great start here. So now, when we think about in the context of Holepunch, is it fair to look at the structure of the Lightning Network and put it up to the structure of the Holepunch protocol and say like these are roughly similar, with the idea of like, you're directly connected to other parties. There's not some central hub that you're all going through. Is that a fair comparison to make?
There's definitely some idea overlap. I would say like it's always a little bit dangerous comparison, because in the end, in the Lightning network, we're always working towards settling on a global chain. Like we're just all about local data just swarming between us. So like me and Paolo or you, Kevin, could have just data swarming between us, and nobody else needs to know about it. In fact, that's a feature, and so we don't need to have it tied back to like global consensus. But like in the way of thinking about Lightning as just two people talking to each other, that's definitely peer-to-peer, right? So like there's definitely some overlap, and that's also why both me and Paolo are big fans of Lightning in general compared to a lot of other stuff.
I see. So yeah, you strip out the Bitcoin component of Lightning where it settles on chain, and then you can kind of start to reason about this as a network for transmitting information rather than transmitting sats and maybe sats along with information.
And then you just add a ton of data structures to it instead, and say like, wait, what if we could take all our databases, everything we do on computers, file sharing, all those things, and make protocols that actually work in this context where they're just like swarming between us rather than to a central place, so we can actually make really powerful applications like we're used to, without like any trade-offs really. So that's our ethos. Just do everything you can do with existing systems, but peer-to-peer and better and more scalable.
Right. Okay. So now, for people who haven't seen the press releases you guys put out yesterday, you had a big gathering of people on Bitcoin Twitter excited about this yesterday. But for anyone who has not listened to that, what is the high-level pitch for Holepunch and Keet, and how do those two interact with each other?
So I think that let's start from the simple terms, I would say, and then we can go deeper and deeper in the complexity of the protocols and so on, right? So imagine, and this is also the good difference between Lightning and Holepunch in general, right? Lightning is about transfer value. So all the and they are reusing the same protocols. In part, Lightning is using some of the protocols that are also used in Holepunch, because anyway, it's networking protocols, and also when you have to transfer value is still represented by data, and in a way, Lightning is using similar protocols. The difference is that Lightning is focusing more on the monetary transfer that is not like terabytes of data, while Holepunch is actually optimized for transferring any amount of money, right? Any amount of data, any amount of data, because it's focused on high throughput delivery, because it's when you are doing file sharing or video calls, that is really key. So if I have to put it in a really simple term, what is Holepunch? I think that many of your viewers and almost everyone is familiar with the concept of BitTorrent. Right, BitTorrent is the most unstoppable file sharing system, right? So we have seen in the in the decade before BitTorrent, many attempts that were all they all got shut down, right, for different reasons. The problem is that there was always a place for centralization, right? Centralization is always the problem, right? So that's why when you think to how to solve a problem in the peer-to-peer world, you have always to remember that the solution should be still peer-to-peer, right? You should never fall back into the old habits of using a central piece, because otherwise that will become the weakest link of your chain. Anyway, we know BitTorrent as a way to share static files, right, between people, and it is beautifully built. It's like a BitTorrent is like, if you think about it, is like Bitcoin has uses Bitcoin, took existing technologies and put them all together to build the best monetary system we know. And BitTorrent did similarly, right? So took like different technologies like hole punching and the idea of swarming and so on, and they shaped in a way that build the most sophisticated, scalable file sharing system. But why limiting to, so this is, I believe, the brilliant part around hole punching and the Holepunch platform. So why limit yourself to file sharing, right? Because files are static files, right? It's something you have in your hard drive, that's it. But what if, instead of sharing a file, you do that you create a sort of torrent, but for data streams. Data streams are live data streams, ever-changing data, right? So it means that our video chat now is generating live data streams for video, and then you have the audio, the text, if you're texting, all the interactions that we have between each other are generating data flow. Those are live data streams. So imagine BitTorrent for data streams, and with, I believe, more in-depth research for the networking part, because then it's extremely highly optimized to connect peers, also in even more complex networks. Because with BitTorrent, you were at home, right? You had to run it on a desktop computer, so you didn't have to worry of, okay, I'm in the middle of nowhere, right? And I still want to connect with someone else, right? You still on your phone or your whatever. Instead, Holepunch, and Matthias especially, focused for so many years on getting the networking part right in order to make sure that these could be brought, all this concept could be brought to a next level. So with live data streams, if you receive a file on BitTorrent a little bit later, it's not a big deal. But if you are doing a video call, that is more problematic, right? So the concept is took BitTorrent, the evolution of torrent, but with more research on the stability on the network, high availability, throughput, and so on and so forth, and especially focus on live data streams. And Keet is the first. So Holepunch is this protocol, is this framework, and is also the name of the company that is building all this, right? So the framework and the software development kit is still called Holepunch, and is the software development kit is the thing that will allow developers to build applications on top of it, and will provide these primitives that will allow simple, distributed, decentralized, secure file storage, distributed meeting points for people that want to create rooms and share files and share video chats together. And all the magic basically happens in Holepunch. Keet is just a proof that what we have been building over the years and this vision works, right? We have been proving that this vision works, and the quality of the result is higher and superior than Zoom already with just a few months in development.
And it's super exciting for us because we love that when we release Keet, this very polished and super cool looking app that just works, and it's just like a really good app. Even if you don't know it's peer-to-peer, it's just like a really solid communications app with chat, file sharing, all these features that users love, but no limits, because it's all peer-to-peer. So unlimited file sharing, you can have as much chat as you want. The video quality is really high because there's no servers, you're just connecting directly to people. All that is possible from peer-to-peer, and what excites me a lot, and I'm sure it excites Paolo also, is that we know that all that work that's being done for that is actually just being delivered by our Holepunch platform, so that any other app we'll make in the future can utilize all of that in a very simple way, so you can like keep making these really powerful apps, because like all the hard work is there. We usually say like it's probably like 10% of Keet is actually Keet, and 90% of it is just, you know, the Holepunch platform just like doing its thing and delivering this cool experience. In fact, we've like the app itself is mainly developed by one guy in our company, like a normal front end developer that's just using the APIs available to just deliver this experience. This is a guy that would normally just be making websites, but all of a sudden, by giving all these primitives to somebody in this very easy to use package, they can start making these like apps that compete with like, you know, 100 million, if not $1 billion industries online, because they can just do it all from the comfort of their computer, not having to worry about scale, DevOps, like they don't have to spin up things on Amazon, they don't have to put in credit cards everywhere to like get anything going, because they can just have the entire experience on their computer, which is already powerful enough to do all this stuff already. Like, you know, we almost, you know, always get a little bit frustrated because we're always getting tricked into thinking we need all this stuff when we have like the most powerful computers in the world. Like, you know how all those like those jokes about like the moon, the computing power that needed to land on the moon is like less than whatever. Like we have like a jillion times that, yet we're like in some weird tech dystopia where we can almost do less than back then, right? Because we've just been thinking into becoming consumers of this big cloud apparatus. So it's super exciting to just like turn that around and give the power back to developers and users.
Yeah, that is fascinating.
Imagine...
And I really like that analogy, the one about BitTorrent. I want to make sure I have that right though. So BitTorrent, you can basically only do static files. Here you can do static files and data streams, and it's a platform that you can build apps on top of. Has anyone used BitTorrent? Is that a common thing for people to build apps on BitTorrent, or is this a new thing that is enabled by Holepunch?
Well, BitTorrent was only used for like sharing files and file systems, and I think it's still being used a bit, but it was very much used like, you know, 10 years ago. But like I've worked a lot with BitTorrents, and we're heavily inspired by the simplicity and beauty of that system. But like there was always, like Paolo said, was always kind of like the focus there was just like being really good at sharing files. And for us as developers, we're like, what if you just did that everywhere? Like took that idea and applied to everything, databases, to communications, to everything. There's no reason why you limit yourself to files. You're just like boxing yourself in. And it's actually only when you do that, and then obviously add a top of R&D on top to actually make, you know, things work, like databases and stuff, which is like why we've been working on this for like the last 3-5 years, right? Because it's no easy task, that you can start to unlock these simple things that developers can just take, and without having a PhD and peer-to-peer science, use and build real apps with them.
But if I can build on one thing that said Matthias, imagine, so now we are in Riverside, right? And how many people, how many developers do you think that it took to build Riverside and as an app, or Zoom, right? So the comparison is probably 100 to 1, right? So that is an insane comparison, and this is basically just something that you can do using actual modern technology like what we are providing, right? So it feels like the rest is still stuck to, we are seeing the Web 2 still selling us technology that was built in 2003, right? And yet that is the thing that they know, and the things that they know they control. So that's the huge difference. And you know, giving this power to all the developers will take one step at a time away the power from the big tech corporations.
So even the building cost for a developer is going to be lower on peer-to-peer apps.
It's got to be free.
Absolutely.
Basically, because they already own the device, right? Like, you know, most developers own a computer already. That computer is insanely powerful. They already have a you know, big enough disk to build any app they want. So
let me give you the example of Riverside, right? So you choose Riverside because basically it will allow you to make sure that my video quality gets recorded on my laptop much better than on Zoom or Google Meet, because then on Google Meet, you know, the client will compress the data, and if you, for example, there is a glitch in the bandwidth, right, then you might receive rotten information. And with the Keet, actually, you can easily do that in the very same way, and you can do that because you record your own video on your local computer, and you can store it, and you can lazily upload it, and you can make a clone of Riverside in probably 20 days, extending Keet. So even less. So you see, and basically everyone can do it. So every time you need to record something, I'm not sure if, and I don't want to know if you're paying Riverside, but every time with simple changes of upgrades or plugins or whatever you want to call that, you can rebuild existing experiences, but developers can offer these experiences for free or for a crumble of the cost of the service, because there is no infrastructure. Because I'm already recording myself on my laptop, you are recording yourself on your laptop, Matthias is recording himself on a laptop, and suddenly you have to use a centralized infrastructure. Why is that? I mean, we can connect to each other and share information that anyway we are sharing with a centralized party. So there is no need anymore of centralized parties anyway.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So if we eliminate the central servers and you look at like the data centers that like Facebook and Amazon and Google are running, what happens to all that? Can all that be stripped away? Like, I guess another way to frame this is like, if you succeed with this vision, what cannot be peer-to-peer?
It's like, just like to add to that, like think about those data centers and think about when you see pictures of them, like these big things, but then think about all the computing just in your room. Like, you're probably sitting on a laptop, you probably have a phone in your pocket, maybe you have a smartwatch, like your TV probably has a processor. Also, like Paolo said, your fridge, can all, like if you add up the world's compute, like those data centers they're nothing all of a sudden. They're just like these behemoths of like, old school thinking. And like there's still use cases for like having computers that run for a long time and stuff like that, but like no need for centralizing all of that all of a sudden in the middle of big buildings. So it's all about unlocking. It's like we're actually not even saying like we need more. We're just saying unlock everything we have, and we have like a massive explosion of compute, which is pretty crazy.
So I think that you can have so if you these supercomputers or big data centers can still be used to, if you have to do like really complex calculations, right? So if you need to run, for example, huge rendering for Pixar, right? You use like insane amount of energy to do like really complex calculations that requires like probably 1,000 CPUs all working together. And of course, if they are in the same location, in the same data center, the latency of communication across all these nodes for rendering or for artificial intelligence will make a difference, right? Compared to peer-to-peer, there is a little bit of network latency. But when it comes to data sharing and collaboration and all this part that is anyway 99% of the use cases of everyone on this earth, you don't need data centers, right? So that is the point. You can still have data centers for all the math part, predicting hurricanes, whatever, right? You can do that, but still you can. But really, the majority of the use cases in people's life don't need that type of data center.
I see. So I want to highlight something that Matthias, you said in the press release when announcing Holepunch. You said, "I'm a big believer in open source and the role that it will play in liberating communication channels for billions of people around the world." What kinds of applications are you most excited about when you think about all the different things that these peer-to-peer channels can now do? What do you think is going to be most impactful to the world?
Well, I mean, it's like, we can also draw some really cool parallels to Bitcoin here in terms of what it unlocked, like economic freedom and stuff like that. Like, just the simplest of things to think about is like, think about all the countries in the world that have like oppressive regimes or like things like that, where people can't say what they want. Like, a big part of that way that's enforced is through centralized systems, these places where, you're afraid to say anything because it's going to get monitored, there's going to be a knock on your door, and the big consequences will happen for you. That's all because, like, monitoring and centralization, right? And we're lucky enough to live in countries where there's less so, but like, also the tendencies worldwide is going towards monitoring and more and more. Like, peer-to-peer just unlocks that immediately. Like, all of a sudden you can have direct channels with people, you can say what you want without fearing things. Like, that's one of the simplest, easiest to understand unlocks that are just so insanely good, right? We can have private conversations with each other, just three people, without thinking about like big impacts. obviously, as you scale up conversations, there is still more concerns about like what you say and blah blah blah. But like like as fundamental things, peer-to-peer just unlocks that, and that's super exciting. And that's a big part of why I'm very into it.
Right. So censorship resistance and being able to just communicate in private is going to be like a
like as a thing that we don't have to say, oh, that's a feature, as a default, right? Like why is it not like this? Everything we do, like privacy is dead on the line. Like obviously, things should just be private and like controllable. Also, like I don't know how you feel, but like if I talk to my wife and in the past we used Facebook Messenger, right? Like, and then all of a sudden you see all the ads coming in where you're like, well, we talked about that, and you're like, that's really really creepy. Like, that's just the other side of it. Like, and that's because everything is monetizable online because they have to make money because it costs them money to drive things. As soon as you start taking that incentive away, things just become much clearer. And it's not like that we're like inherently good people promising we won't promise it. It's just because promising we can't commercialize this. We're just saying it can't because it's peer-to-peer. We don't have we're not in the middle of the traffic, right? So there's it's just an inherent feature, which is very exciting.
Yeah, and this almost, it sounds like a parallel to life before the internet, where if you want to have a public conversation, you can, and you can blast stuff out to everyone. But if you want to have a conversation in your home, it's a conversation you're having on your own and no one else is involved. And this may just be like reintroducing that idea on the internet, where we spent the last 10 years thinking that everything that we post is going to be everywhere at all times, and now we have this alternate avenue where if we want, we can have these closed conversations and we can just live how we've always lived for thousands of years.
And I'm like, there's also all these weird tendencies in modern society. I don't know how it is in your country, but like here, if you're a politician and you want to post things, they tend to post it on Facebook, and to read it, you have to go through this cookie wall where you basically have to accept that Facebook will mine all your cookies forever to read something about public life. Like, what's going on? And like, that's an American company. We don't even live in America. So it's like even harder to understand the consequences of that. Like, that's just because we lost the battle for, like, the old internet lost the battle for privacy and like figuring out this stuff from the get-go. And that's why we're so drawn to it and kind of like rebooting and saying, fundamentals have to solve this, which is like the Holepunch platform, and then the things we build on top just work with this constraint or feature. Always. You cannot turn it off.
Okay, so I have an interesting question for you guys. If you two were in charge of Facebook and Google today, knowing what you know about peer-to-peer apps and your vision here for what Holepunch can accomplish, what actions would you take to avoid your business being disrupted?
So, well, I think that you wish that heads of these companies would would have this long-term vision and understanding, because most of the time, I mean, we have seen that with Bitcoin, right? So in Bitcoin, in 2009 and 10 and 11 and 12, all the banks and everyone in the traditional financial sector was making fun of Bitcoin, right? Saying it cannot ever do anything, cannot ever take the financial system, and this and that, and it kept growing and growing and growing, because in a way, the fact that the possibilities of Bitcoin, and as I'm sure the possibilities of Holepunch in terms of undertaking the communication space, these possibilities will be undermined and laughed at by the big tech sector, only to find out that in maybe 10 years, 15 years, things will be 50% of the web is actually peer-to-peer and is back to be peer-to-peer, right? And definitely there will be pushback. But you know what? I mean, in the end, also governments, are in Europe at least, there is some interest in making sure that big tech is not eating all your data and then profiting from all your data. So in a way, if we don't do something now, we will end up in a fully dystopian Orwellian world where this actually corporation will be more powerful, and in a certain way they are already, but the corporation could be even more powerful than governments. And so this is, I believe, like one of the last bells that we can ring in order to make a change, because otherwise things with Web3, keep in mind that things will not change, right? And we are seeing, and that's why you are seeing all Google and all the others are actually excited by Web3. why is that? I mean, ideally, Web3 should be a movement that is born from crypto with the same ethos that should say, let's take back our data. Let's not have big tech monetizing our data. And hence, you have all these venture funds from, run by the very same people that are heavily invested or, involved with the big tech companies that are pouring money into Web3, because actually Web3 is just Web2 with a different hat and with just another ways to monetize the content. It's just creating a token, right? So you are adding layer of complexity on top of what should be extremely simple, right? You are a person, you are producing data should be yours, and you should decide where to share or with whom share that data. So I think that what will happen is that, to summarize, they will just make laugh. We will laugh. They will laugh at what we are doing until it will be too late for them to change. In a way, I'm not sure if you ever read that book, but there is a book that I really do love. I read that when I was probably 16 years old. The first time was Cathedral and the Bazaar from Eric S. Raymond. It talks about two styles of building stuff, right? You have the cathedrals. They are beautiful, really complex. It takes the one in Milan took 300 years to be built, right? And a lot of people, a lot of effort, a lot of money. And then you have the bazaars, right? The bazaars are like this random organization, people that are selling data, selling stuff, buying stuff, super mess. From the outside seems like extremely chaotic. But it works. It has been working for thousands of years, right? It's like everywhere. It's like the markets, the real markets, not the supermarkets we are used to. But it's like that is the bazaar, right? And the thing with the cathedral, like we can make the comparison of the cathedral and the big tech corporations. To change something for them, it takes a lot of time. To change something in a cathedral, right? To restructure it. The cathedral is extremely complex. It was built a long time ago, so you are fearful that it might all fall down, right? If you don't don't take the right precautions. And with the bazaar, things are always moving, right? The shape keeps changing, and an hurricane came, and another bazaar starts, right, somewhere else or in a nearby city, right? So he's unstoppable, the bazaar, because it's just people interaction. It doesn't matter. It's not strongly built. It can change shape in a moment. So that is Holepunch. Holepunch is basically a bazaar for information, for data, compared to cathedrals that are extremely complex to change and eventually will just something that we will look at as a reminder of the past.
I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Voltage. Voltage is the industry standard for Lightning Network infrastructure. Creating layer 2 applications and services on top of Bitcoin starts with Voltage, where you can spin up nodes, get access to liquidity, optimize your node, and much more. Voltage is leading the way as the next generation provider of Lightning Network infrastructure. And if you want to get a free trial and start using Voltage today, you can do so at voltage.cloud. I really like that analogy. It's a very fluid system, and it can kind of like adapt over time rather than something that was built, with one sole purpose and spent so much effort and time to construct that now it's not adaptable. It's fragile. I want to get into the concept of hole punching a little bit, because I believe that was the inspiration for the name Holepunch. In your press release, you said Holepunch is powered by an innovative stack of distributed technology, including DHT distributed databases, where users can find and connect to each other to form a swarm on real-world home and office networks. So can we touch on how does this swarm work? How users exactly find each other on a distributed network?
Yeah, totally. I think me and Paolo can talk about that for a very long time. So basically, and if I get too technical or something, just let me know. But how in the old internet, everything is an IP. You have an IP address, and maybe you use a VPN to hide it and stuff like that, because you leak metadata with them. But basically, there was these 4 numbers that identify where you are in the system. that's great and all, but it's kind of like, what if instead of having just those 4 numbers, you can have a cryptographic identity instead, something that is inherently yours, not something you get from your internet provider, but like a cryptographic key pair, like you use if you use blockchain transactions and stuff like that. And the public key of that was just your address, something you could take with you, and people could just dial that address and connect to you. So that's basically that's like the fundamental thing we think about when we think about P2P networking, is like that we have to have that. So what we build out is a system where users just have these public key identities, and then they're using our distributed hash table, which Paolo talked about a little bit before, but like that's heavily inspired by the work we did on BitTorrent in the past, and like by that technology, because it proved like a super scalable solution for finding people that are announcing a little bit of data like that. Using that, peers can kind of find each other. So now here's the problem, like when because like the world is built on these things called IPs, right, that I talked about. And in fact, it's built on this thing called IPv4, which is this very old version of IP. And the problem was when that was designed back in way back, they didn't make that many of them. So the world ran out of it. That's why in every home we have this thing called a router. You probably got that from your internet provider. Because there's only 4 million addresses in the world. It's very little. So the world ran out of it, and everybody got a router, because then they can just give the router an IP. So now this connectivity stuff, but if I knew your IP and I wanted to connect you, got a little bit harder, because your device doesn't have an IP anymore. Only your router did it. That was kind of how they scaled that system. So the problem was then more things came online, and it turns out these routers you had at home were not enough anymore either. So now if you go to your internet provider, they have routers also. So it's just all like, it's a layer of routers, because they kept running out of addresses. And every time they added one like that, it meant that connecting to people got much harder, because you didn't have an address for it. So we use all these techniques, which is like goes under the umbrella of hole punching, which basically just means like unwrap this entire mess and like find each other, and then actually connect to each other using some tricks where you trick the routers into thinking they're connecting to servers, but they're actually connecting to each other, but trick in a good way. And do that as privately as possible, so you don't leak any information about, as little information as possible about who's connecting to who and stuff like that. And that allows you to actually run, just on your laptop on your home network, which is normally like really locked down. Like server infrastructure, if you wanted to, which is like essential for P2P network, because if we can't connect to each other, it's kind of like a very boring network, right? We invested a ton of R&D into making that work, and like then you'll have, if you're at an office, you probably have a very locked down network. It turns out you can also still connect through those with a bunch of techniques that are also in the hole punching umbrella, with a bunch of math and statistics. But that's essential. The cool thing about all this stuff is that it all just boils down to, you have a public key, you have an API, you can just connect to the public key, and then the platform takes care of it and hides all this complexity for you, and everything just works, and you don't have to worry about IPs, and they're hidden as much as possible. So it's just kind of like this virtual network that is just very scalable and super powerful.
And so you're connecting to devices that have a public key on that device, right, rather than a router?
Yeah, so you're connecting directly to, like, you can obviously connecting through your infrastructure, but like at the end of the day, you're then just connected. Well, you're still going through the routers, but like you're not going through like a cloud. So you just, it's not free, but you're already paying for it, because you pay for your internet subscription every month, and that's basically what you're paying for.
So imagine that you have like two computers, two devices, right? So they are, in two home networks in the past, right? And this is one actually the things that BitTorrent got it right? Imagine, if you recall, like with the previous file sharing systems, you had to configure your router to open a port to the public, and then forward the traffic to your desktop computer where you were running, some file share application. That, from a usability perspective, was really complex, right? So it was taking a lot of time and energy, and not everyone could do that, right? It's not not everyone, right? So it ended up that with BitTorrent, but I think that with Holepunch as a networking library as well, it's much more sophisticated. You can actually, if you have two devices, right, you can still one of the fundamental aspects of networking and firewalls and routers is that they are configured to block all the incoming traffic from the outside, but always allowing the outgoing traffic from the inside, right? So you can connect wherever you want, of course, but if someone wants to connect and start, getting inside your network, usually the default is block everything that is coming from the outside. So basically the idea, one of the most interesting ideas and concepts is the trick that Matthias was describing. You can trick the two routers of the two people that want to establish a direct connection with each other. So you can have like a third party sending like a simple packet to the both routers that tells that actually these two devices were willing in the first instance of both of them to establish a connection from the inside. So since the connections from the inside are, by default and inherently allowed, then you can establish this connection. So it really simplified terms, but is like that.
I see. Now, this idea of hole punching, the concept itself, is not a new idea, right? It's been around for, I believe I saw Skype used it in the early 2000s. Like, it's been around for a long time. Why today? What's the constraint that has been unlocked that enables us to now create Holepunch, the product, today, when the concept has been around for a couple decades?
Well, yeah, like first of all, a lot of really good things have also been around for a while. Like a lot of the underlying tech and stuff like blockchains were all like invented in the 70s. But I think it's like, with many good ideas, first of all, it takes a little bit of time for people to like click, like this is actually really good. But also like in the last 10, 15 years, people have just been the incentive has been aligned against it. People have been wanting to make these big silos to monetize tons of data, and like it's kind of like been the norm that like the more data we can collect, the more we can monetize. That's a success, and like there's been like this like almost lulling of users to kind of like just go along with it, because we didn't really fully understand the consequences of that also as users. And it's first only now, like when we're almost in this almost tech dystopian world, where we kind of realize, whoa, maybe that wasn't the best idea, and there's a lot of pushback, and now a lot of these ideas are coming back. And it's, I'm sure it's also frustrating for Paolo, because I've been in this peer-to-peer world the entire time, and I've been like, this is obviously what's going to happen. We need to start doing this, and like without going back to it too much, BitTorrent really showed that this is something you could do at scale, also with also very few resources, in a completely unstoppable way. So there's definitely going to be a big shift towards that now, and like with all this more data awareness, and also like we talked about before, there's also tons of regulation coming in probably around like data has to stay local and stuff like that, because all of a sudden we're realizing we're already way too far into the other world.
I'd like to. Oh, sorry, Matthias, go
No,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, and also like obviously like infrastructure has also caught up with it. Like, we're all sitting at home now on these really powerful connections. Like most of us are. Like, there's been a ton of money put into building actual internet infrastructure. And it's almost so good now that it's almost a scam. We're probably all paying for internet connections that we don't really use. Like when you buy a gigabit fiber from your provider, it's because they probably know that you're using 10 megabits in practice on average every day, so they can charge you for it. But like actually the infrastructure is there to drive all this traffic. So that's also super exciting for peer-to-peer, because we actually have high quality networks, and even on low quality networks you can participate. You just maybe you don't share as much as other people do in your small network, and that's the power of peer-to-peer. Also, it's not like everybody has to do the same thing, as long as we all have a shared good experience.
If I can offer a different point of view, I completely agree with Matthias. It's here. I think about from the monetary point of view, right? So you have all this good tech, right? This peer-to-peer technology that has been around for a while. But as we are saying with Holepunch, it's not easy to monetize that. I mean, it's free for everyone, right? We don't have the control of the network. The BitTorrent clients or BitTorrent client developers didn't have control of the network, right? They didn't have just control over the user experience, right? That they were providing, but that's it. So there has never been an economical incentive for big tech corporates of focusing on actually making peer-to-peer technology successful. The more peer-to-peer technology is successful, the less control they have over the products and the networks, and the less revenues that they have, right? So there is an incentive for them actually to not make it working. And it's kind of sad, but is exactly what we are doing here with Holepunch, right? So we have big shoulders, both with the different companies that are involved with this project, right? So we have all the funding that we need, right? And we are ready. We believe that there is the concept of individual sovereignty that has been around also in the Bitcoin industry for a while. But it's really hard to reach the individual sovereignty if you have only freedom, financial freedom. You need also freedom of speech, right? So freedom of sharing whatever you want or storing whatever you want, right? Without having to store. Imagine how many photos, how many parents are storing a ton of photos of their children's on a iCloud or Google Photos, right? So if you stop for a second and think about it, is insanely worrisome. So that's something that has to change, right? It's not even scalable. It's not something that I believe that so centralized data center will not scale well in the future, right? Especially with the changes in the geopolitical conditions and wars going around. And also, when I talk to my developers, when I develop things myself, and in this part of why I really love peer-to-peer is that you should build something that is resistant to the wrath of God, right? It's not like something that will fall down after the first peak. And that is the thing that peer-to-peer does well, right? So imagine, even God forbid, but still imagine that the world has been full of wars for the last thousands of years, right? So what happens to all this data in a case of a war? If this data is in a country, maybe this country will decide, and these data centers will be in a specific country. Maybe this country could decide to seize off the data, harvest it, to weaponize it, right? So you never know what will happen with your own data. So it's not scalable, it's not future-proof, and it's not like, you should always think to the worst-case scenario when you are building a long-term applications, and that is for what is Bitcoin for me on a financial monetary base, right? But then you need something that is completely complementary to Bitcoin on the data side.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. This reminds me a little bit of the missions here with projects like Umbrel and Start9, building personal servers for storing data, storing passwords, running Bitcoin nodes, things like that. How do you compare those two? So the project of like Holepunch and something like an Umbrel or a Start9, where now they're pushing more, they're outside of the just Bitcoin sphere, and now they're saying, look, you can run this as a personal server and hold all your data there. I guess the trade-off would be either you're doing it on your Raspberry Pi or you're doing it on your home computer. Is that a correct comparison to make?
Well, I must admit that I didn't dig super deep in Umbrel, but my feeling is that the tech used usually by the other solutions that we are aware of are still trying to replicate and mimic the solutions that are the classic client server solutions, right? Yes, you can have your Raspberry, you can have multiple Raspberries, they sync together a little bit, right? But the insane part of Holepunch and the things that make it completely different is that it's kind of a recursion. The entire technology is basically kind of fractal in a way, right? The data is stored and can be shared across your own relays, your own multiple devices, your peers in the very same way. So there are no difference between yourself and multiple versions of yourself or different parties. It's just what you want to share, and with boom, right? The concept of public keys and private keys that Matthias was saying before, in terms of pairing, establishing the connection, and also signing the data and so on and so forth, right? That is the big difference here, is that or at least this is what we feel, is that Holepunch is a protocol that can enable you to create a store of all your personal life, right? Imagine, and let me give you an example. With Holepunch, we can create an app, right? A simple application where that you can keep throwing data, like a Dropbox or like a Google Photos, whatever, iCloud, right? You can throw data to it, right, and files, and it will keep storing them. You can store them, and there you can add a nice data structure that also indexed by date, right? So now you can have a visual application where you can, with a slider, you can go back in history. You can rewind your own life. But then, given it's similar to BitTorrent, right? You can have another peer that just syncs your data, and it's encrypted, so it doesn't see anything, right? It cannot access your data, but it can still keep a copy of your data. And then another peer, right? If you remember BitTorrent, you have like this swarming technology where you were sharing a file, and the multiple peers could of course find the file and download it from yourself. So you can reapply the same logic, still is fully encrypted, and you can make it in a way that if the other peers cannot access to the content, it will just help you to back up and distribute the backups of your own personal life across the globe. Because one of the most interesting aspects, you can envision this app. Right now you have this nice app that is like this pod where you keep putting your own data, but then it's running this crazy network of peers in this mesh of peers, and then you wipe out your computer, right, and you cross the border, and we can make a system that will allow you to actually generate your master key that you used before, right, from a seed, from 24 words. So suddenly you can access to it doesn't matter if an atomic bomb will wipe out your home. You have 24 words in your mind, and you'll get all your personal life fully backed up everywhere from these network peers. So yes, you can run a Raspberry Pi, you can do whatever, but still we can make something that is definitely more catastrophic proof.
And one thing I just want to add to what Paolo is saying is also like we're also super focused on being something that's very, very low resource intensive. Like that means that if you have your life backed up and you just wanted to access a little bit of it, like we do all this work to making sure you can very quickly sync something, just the thing you're looking for. And so that if you're running on an old phone or if you're running on an old computer, if you're just like in very limited connectivity, which you might be, you don't have to sit there and wait for like 12 hours for all your data to come through. We do a lot of indexing techniques on all locally, so you can just get just the part you want. And like if you try something like Keet, it's very mind bendy sometimes. But if you go in there and you drop like a 5 gigabyte file in the file sharing, you'll notice it appears everywhere at the same time. And you're like, whoa, did I just transfer 5 gigabytes in like a millisecond? You kind of did, because you're just transferring the fact that you have it, and then peers are just syncing the parts they want. So if you watch a movie and you just like watch a little bit of it, just that part is syncing. And so we had that philosophy at the core of everything we do, saying like, this is for real people. This is not for people that have like servers. This is for people who have real devices, low power. They want to get on with their life. They don't want to sit there looking at a loading screen for like 2 hours for all this data. So you just want to look at the stuff they're looking for. They want to do what they normally do, but they also want to do it peer-to-peer, so they don't have all the problems of centralized systems.
It a bit is like BitTorrent. You remember when you were seeing the preview, or you could skim through the file before having fully downloaded it, right? So because you start downloading chunks of imagine a movie, right? So the example that Matthias made is like, you drop a 5 gigabyte movie, right? And you can skim through it, right? And you can move, the slider, and you can move to any point in time, right? And the system behind the scenes will just fetch the data blocks that are corresponding to what you actually need. And if you apply that to your personal life, it's really meaning that you get just the index. You can, you first fetch the index of your whole personal life that is really tiny, is a really tiny data structure. And then you select what you want to see. You don't need to download it all. So it's not like Dropbox or whatever. It's like you get only the few things you need in that specific moment in time. And can I add something? You can put the Bitcoin blockchain on top of it, right? These data structures are perfect to index. Actually, we did tests in the past. You can actually put the Bitcoin blockchain in this data structure. So you can actually make like, you can even resync your own node from home, or mount the file system. You can actually create a file system out of it that actually distribute the data through peers. I have that at home, right? So you have a disk that is like a remote disk or like a local disk, your operating system see that as a local disk, but it's actually peers that are just storing the data for yourself in an encrypted way, so they cannot access the data. And it's like really, it's the quality, the speed, and so on is insane. And you can actually access the data much faster because then you can download multiple chunks of data from multiple peers.
This is very cool. Was it also an unlock when, like you talked about the fact that you could take 24 word seed phrase and access all your data if it's been wiped off your computer or something. Was that an unlock enabled by Bitcoin? Like, is that another reason why this couldn't have existed like 15 years ago, where people weren't very familiar with the concepts of seed phrases, and like now it's more of a mainstream concept now? Was that important in unlocking what Holepunch can do?
User experience in general is critical, right? So because one of the limitations also of peer-to-peer in the past, in a way, was that in part was never developed that much, and in part people or the actual applications, peer-to-peer application, were poor in quality, right? So you had always the feeling that you were getting a more private solution, but the quality was actually lower. So you had to make compromises. And I believe that is what Matthias described before with Keet. With Keet, it's clear that these compromises are not realistic anymore, right? So you don't have to compromise anything. Actually, you have a better experience. You can drop files, you can skim through files much faster, you can do better quality video calls because you don't have a central server compressing your own data, and so on and so forth, right? So right now, we are at a stage where we can provide a much better user experience in peer-to-peer applications than what centralized applications can do, because the centralized applications can just reach a certain scale, then they choke under pressure sometimes, right? Or they cannot easily keep adding data centers, because then eventually it will add up and can risk to cascade like a castle of cards. Now, when it comes to the 24 words, it's definitely something that we learn from Bitcoin. It's actually a cool thing. But even more so, we're working on a ledger app so that you can actually you can authenticate and start signing the messages, the data you're sending through that ledger app. How cool is that, right? So you can actually bring your ledger with you, and you basically, you don't even have to worry that someone is cloning your drive to copy your master key. The master key is derived by your ledger. That is like that is, I believe, one of the holy grails that we can make happen here.
So you can access your Bitcoin and your data from your ledger.
Exactly.
Space your entire life.
All right, I want to talk a bit about your Lightning integration as well, because I believe Lightning support is being built into Holepunch along with Tether support for microtransactions. So maybe we can start off, is this at all related to the work that Synonym is doing, bringing Tether to Lightning? I know there's an Omnibolt thing going on. How do all these different concepts work together here?
So first of all, just want to touch on the payment a little bit. Like both me and Paolo, we're big believers that, having worked in open source and making tons of apps and software in the past, like that's a huge missing step in software. That's just like simple monetization. Like it's way too hard right now to build actual apps that make money without like being tied into all kinds of online things where you actually all of a sudden have to make a lot of money for it to pay off, because otherwise you're just losing money. And that's a big driver for us. Like we want to, like, because peer-to-peer really unlocks the thing where you can just, you can have it all on your laptop. So you also need to be able to monetize and make money from your laptop if you wanted to sell something. So like, let's say you wanted to sell like storage, let's say you wanted to sell video services. It could be that you're sitting there doing captions and video, and that's a service. Doesn't matter. But like, you need to be able to get paid for it. So like building a platform like this, where we have this very ambitious goal of like unlocking developers to build apps, like if you can't commercialize, it's kind of like, what's the point? Because then we're just back in the same exploitative structures that we've always been in. So like from the get-go, we're like, we need strong fundamentals there, and like both Lightning and Tether are really good at that. And I'll let Paolo talk about the Synonym stuff a little bit.
Yeah, I think that it's important to see the difference between Holepunch and usually the other approaches, right? So Holepunch is a data protocol, a protocol to create scalable applications that can share any amount of data really quickly, right? So as we said before, the holy grail is data, and for Holepunch, and not transfer of wealth, right? So blockchains and Bitcoin and Lightning are providing the transfer of wealth, but so that's one of the reasons why Holepunch, there are solutions that are doing something similar potentially, but their approach is trying to reuse Lightning network, and for us, is not really scalable, that approach, because that network is built with the first use case of delivering wealth. And wealth usually requires less bandwidth, less different data structures, even possibly, than what we need to transfer data, right? So Holepunch focuses on data, and then of course, as Matthias rightly said, developers should be paid for their work, right? That is really important. And in order so payments are optional, and they are part of the SDK, so developers can quickly build and add payment system, right? The cool thing about the SDK allows you to actually get paid. For example, you are streaming. Imagine that you are streaming trading signals through Holepunch, right? So you are a good mathematician, you are good in stats, right? And you built an algorithm, but you don't want to sell the algorithm. You want to stream trading signals, and you want to be paid per minute, right? You can do that. You can do you can sell it through Holepunch network, or you can stream it through Holepunch network, but you are going to encrypt it only with the key of the people, the public key of the people that are actually paying for you, right? So you are basically advertising yourself, saying, look, I have this cool trading signal feed, and I want to be paid 10,000 satoshis per minute, or 2 tethers per minute. I don't know, right? Random numbers, but still. If someone stops to pay you, you just remove his public key from the encryption, so he will not receive your payments anymore. But both with Tether and with Lightning, you can do micropayments at scale. You can do you can actually provide. That is one example, but you can imagine someone like Joe Rogan could make a podcast and get paid for the entire for seeing the podcast, for the full podcast, or for by minute. I don't know, right? But it could be you can actually create all these experiences, and all developers just need to be a way to. They just need primitives to get paid, right? Software primitives to accept or offer payments. Simple as that. And Synonym actually is quite complementary, right? They're working on a Bitcoin Lightning wallet that will support also Tether on Lightning, right? Tether on Lightning, of course, for all the reasons we said before in terms of scalability and the fact that eventually share state blockchains are not going to scale really well in the future, is important to have a solution that is channel based, like a sort of socket based for payments, where that is one-to-one. Synonym is doing amazing research on that part, and also on the user experience of that, right? So we want to make sure that we don't fall back in having complex wallets also for users, because if we are really willing to go to mass adoption, and by the way, I believe that Keet and similar applications that we can build on Holepunch have the chance to reach mass adoption. So if you see how they're presented also on the website, it's not like, okay, this is a new crypto cool project, right? It's not like that. This is a video chat, use it, it's private, you can share files, you can do whatever in a video chat, right? Simple as that, right? So in this way, offering this application, focusing on the user experience, without having to worry on complex architectures and backend infrastructures and data centers, you can actually allow both Bitcoin, Lightning Network, and other payment systems to actually increment their installed monetary base by tenfolds easily, because then you give a simple way for people to do the two things that they do care about: talking with the people they do care about or they love, with friends and so on, and also share wealth. That's it. And you have won in that way, right? As long as it's simple, is for the bus driver, for the cook, for the chef, for the teacher. If you get it right, you make it simple, you remove all that complex, cookie user experience that we have in crypto, where we pretend that everyone understand what we are saying, then you can really deliver products that can be replacing what people are used to in their normal lives, and still behind the scenes giving them better preconditions in terms of privacy, in terms of security, and so on and so forth, right? They will become a more private, more secure, probably even without knowing. But we shouldn't pretend that everyone cares. We should just build applications that will push these features behind the scenes to the rest of the world.
Right, something that just works, and you almost forget about all the details because it works so well, and you just want to use it for that purpose.
Also, one thing I just want to add, like, to what Paolo said, like, think about that use case Paolo said in the beginning, like the person making, like, analyzing data sets, selling that. Think about what that means in a P2P network. It doesn't mean that you're streaming and maybe getting a CSV file. It could be, but it could also be that you're booting up another peer-to-peer app that's then directly consuming that data for you and presenting it in a cool way. Now, what if, like, somebody has a better way of doing that? Then you just use a new peer-to-peer app because there's no silos, and use your data in that. Like, your data stays with you. It's not being locked into some platform somewhere. Like, you're in control, right? So, like, basically, like, through, like, market economics, you always end up with the best app possible, because this kind of, like, everybody can compete against everybody. There's not, like, anybody who just sits there being like, well, I'm just going to log it all up, and then you can just do what you want, and I'm not going to innovate anymore. Then they just die out, and you can move your data elsewhere. So it's almost by definition, it's going to create better apps because of that.
Right, it forces everyone to compete on user experience and making sure the apps are, like, smooth as can be, because there's no lock-in. Yeah. And the idea of, like, being able to seamlessly transfer both information and money in this ecosystem seems like it's very broad, right? It covers so much that it's almost hard to grasp. Are there any particular use cases or things that you think, man, a developer's going to build that and it's going to absolutely take off? This is going to be a really exciting first few use cases. I know you guys have been thinking about, what developers might build. What are some of your favorite ideas so far for aspiring developers, anyone listening to this conversation, to build using Holepunch?
Wow, there's so many, but, like, we're very excited about just all kinds of apps, but especially apps that take advantage of the fact that you can move a lot of data on peer-to-peer networks. So, like, even simple things like a peer-to-peer VPN, like, why is that not a thing that just exists where everybody can act as endpoints and you can just sell traffic if you wanted to that way, or you can do it for free if that's what you're into. But, like, simple ways like that, where instead of being logged into these online providers that we don't know what to do with our data, but then we can use, like, an open network of it. Like, that's super exciting to me. Also, things like, if you look at things like search, right? Search might be one of the most unethical things online, because it's just these big companies ingesting all our data into selling us products. But the idea of search is really good, right? It's like finding things is very nice. Like, that's why we all use it anyway. If you take that stuff and you make that peer-to-peer, and, like, you do the indexing locally, then all of a sudden the unlocks you get from that are insane. Like, that's like, you can make killer products that all of a sudden doesn't have to mine the data of the world, but you can also still make things where users can sell data to ingest, and because you have the payments and stuff. Like, so instead of having one big mega monopoly of search engines, we can have tons of them in the peer-to-peer ecosystem, all solving problems, and we can move the indexes locally, which means that we don't have these, like, big sets of data that everybody can mines and stuff. That's super exciting for me. Like, so just, like, the explosion of monopolies into all these kinds of apps.
On my side, I would suggest that I agree that the search engine is one of the coolest ones, because knowledge shouldn't be used against yourself, and one of the main reasons of having search engines is, like, access to knowledge. If you don't have a fair democratic access to knowledge, then it's kind of it can create really this dystopian future in a way, right? So, because the way the searches, the results are sorted is quite impactful on what people think, right? So could be interesting to change that. But if I have to say another one, for example, it's mapping to me, right? I
Mm-hmm.
do quite a lot of work in the past, also at the university in mapping. And you know, when you go on Google Maps, but also if you use something like OpenStreetMap, you have your computer, like you have like a nice UI that will fetch tiles, right? They are like these small square boxes of the world, right? So it's like a puzzle composed, right? So imagine that is first of all one of the easy wins of Holepunch, right? You can store all those tiles on a peer-to-peer network, right? So suddenly you can download them from local peers, right? You are like in Italy, you don't want to download tiles from a Japanese peer, right? You'll download them locally, but also even more so, right? One of the interesting ways on how big tech giants are monetizing mapping is, you know, now on the maps you search, of course, for restaurants, right, or for schools, or for this and that, right, for grocery stores, and you know that is ton data indexed. When you are going there, right, you are checking in or you are nearby that, right? So that is information by itself. When you are driving your car, that is information that Google is using to understand if there is traffic and so on and so forth, right? So I think that if I would trust more like someone living in a small town in imagine someone living in a small town in Italy to provide contextful and precise information about the different facilities on the territory, and putting them on a peer-to-peer network rather than relying entirely on the sorting or the priority that maybe Google Maps is giving me when I'm going around. So I think that mapping with the amount of data that there is available, and is one probably, I feel like eventually search will be even more localized onto maps, right? So we are not seeing that yet, but maps are insanely powerful if you want to actually show information, right? The ton of information in this world is localized in specific location and coordinates. So you can actually build the best map and social map that you can ever do, and you can make that contribution based and based on location, and data can be actually stored by the peers.
And like, imagine if you combine those things also, right? It's kind of like you go on the peer-to-peer search engine, you find the local provider that is like has high ranks based on the peers in the area, saying this is the person that makes the best list of restaurants. That's like how we do it in real life. You would love to talk to a local saying, go here, right? You pay them for them, but you pay a reasonable amount. It's not like a monthly subscription based on like what they want. It's there just between you and them. You get them, you sync the local map, boom. Like, it's kind of like that's what I love about peer-to-peer. It's all complementary. Instead of building silos and then every silo having to do everything, we just build small things, and they all work together. And then all of a sudden we're like, whoa, what happened? Like, like it's just like the insanity of it.
And you can make that payment on Lightning or on Tether, and then you aggregate all these little tiny payments, and all of a sudden you have this big network of like global payments, slinging money and information back and forth. I just want to, I know we're running out of time, but I want to touch on one more final point on Holepunch, the business model for Holepunch and Keet, and what is the relationship between the different companies in this like Tether family of companies. I just want to highlight that for listeners. So will Holepunch make money? Will Keet make money? And how do the Holepunch, Keet, Tether, and Bitfinex and Synonym all relate to each other?
So maybe Matthias, if you want to start, otherwise, I can just give it a quick overview.
Well, I can start on the Holepunch side of it at least. Like, so basically, we made Keet, the app. It's closed right now. It's going to be open source later in the year when we open it up. Open source, if I didn't say that. We're giving it away. Like, it's very exciting. We're not like, there's no secret agenda or like, all of a sudden we pulled the rock and like now, because it's all peer-to-peer, it's like cost us nothing to run. We're just very excited to get it out there and showcase exactly what you can do, which is obviously also of tremendous value for us. Obviously, Holepunch is a company and we're working on various things on the network, services and stuff like that to monetize on in the future. But like, we're still also iterating exactly what we'll build. But like, the cool thing for me about peer-to-peer again is like, it's this explosion of the market. So there'll be tons of opportunities to make money for everybody, including us. Like, there's going to be tons of services needing to be built. There's tons of infrastructure needing to be built. The main thing that's very, very important for us is we don't like build in like some weird token that has, pay to play all of a sudden, because infrastructure at the end of the day needs to be free and open, because otherwise, what's the point? And monetization has to happen like through things that actually create value. And make the experience better, and there's no shortage of that stuff, right? Either in the network, there's tons of ways. So we're kind of like navigating, and like I said, we're gonna release more in the future about that. And Paolo can talk about the other part.
Yeah, I think that so Holepunch, the entire initiative started with one thing in mind, right? It should be realistic and real peer-to-peer rather than fake peer-to-peer where we somehow, some way, we retain the control of the network, right? So in a way, it will be fully open source. So, if people don't like what we are doing, they can fork it away, right? So that is always it. But one of the interesting things about Holepunch is that it will create an even playing field for everyone, even for us, right? So again, we don't have the control. So we are providing the tools to all the developers to create applications. And we are developers ourselves, right? So we have a ton of ideas where we are, of course, creating capital, creating, ventures that will maybe imagine like a peer-to-peer VPN or like, I don't know, indexing service, cool indexing service, or whatever you can think about, right? So it's not like usually when it comes to companies, and the classic thing is, okay, want to make 99% of the money, the rest can make 1% of the money. But we started Holepunch with a different vision. In a way, it's also giving back to the community. And if no one is willing to do that, nothing will ever happen, right? So in the end, so here's the dilemma. If you are not building actual peer-to-peer tech, then the only result that you can ever get in your life is that big tech companies will make even more money. So we already tried that, we've done that. So, it's better to try something else, right? And there is a ton of money to be made for everyone, because you can recreate all the apps. Imagine also, the Shazam or whatever application you have there. Right? It's going back to what Matthias was saying. You can build algorithms that recognize songs better than others, right? And you can sell that algorithm. You can listen to music through this peer-to-peer Shazam, and you can identify the music, right? So everything that has been built today can be built on top of peer-to-peer with much less cost. So any developer can compete with big corporations. So there is a ton of money to be made for everyone. We are definitely not greedy. Otherwise, we wouldn't have contributed for so many years on open source stuff ourselves. And when it comes to Tether and Bitfinex, for us is we have two successful companies, right? Arguably centralized, right? But we do what should be done in our opinion. So first of all, the meme is we are all in for the tech, where people laugh at it, right? So for us, it's actually real, right? I hope that your listeners can see it, right? It's not all about making money. Of course, we are running two companies, and Holepunch is a company, so companies need to generate profit to be sustainable. But is even Tether, right? It didn't it's an extremely profitable company, never took one single dividend out of the revenues ever, right? So for us, ensuring that we can do what we are doing for the longest time possible and subsidizing great ideas and funding great projects is the only thing that matters. In the end, we are all simple people. Like, I don't have any Lambos, don't plan to have, and so on. And this is true for everyone, in at least in our ecosystem. The mission is much more important than your personal status. You want to create a cool thing, and at the end of the day, you want to be proud of what you have built. And there is a huge space, right? It's also there is a huge space in that we are creating to make more money. So but we want to be exactly as in Bitcoin. Nothing is pre-mined. In the case of Holepunch, the pre-mining would be like a token, right? So creating a token to run the network and keeping 70% of the supply. That is something that we are completely against, and that's why we wanted to start with something that is, token agnostic, fully free, and so on and so forth. So for us, it's purely giving back to the community and get and have some fun and be excited what we do at the end of the day. And the same thing applies to a synonym.
I just want to add, like, me and Paolo, we've only known each other for a long time, and like this is like kind of like the ethos from the beginning. We're both kind of like uncompromising people in terms of like the only thing that matters. The main thing that matters for us is like just building really, really good apps and software. Like that's why we do open source. That's why we do anything. And in my peer-to-peer career, like I've been in here for a while, then I met many people. They're always like, "Well, you should do a token. You should do this. You should do that." And Paolo was like the first person to just be like, just keep building good software, and that's what we've been doing the entire time we've known each other. So I don't see why we're not going to do that the next 5 years also. Like it's kind of like in our blood,
Yeah.
Awesome. I really enjoyed this conversation. This was a ton of fun. I have a couple extra questions, rapid fire ones. If you guys have a couple extra minutes,
sure.
We can do. I do the segment called the lightning round. So are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
Welcome to the lightning round presented by Zebedee, your portal into the world of Bitcoin gaming. The Zebedee app offers a full-featured Lightning wallet seamlessly integrated with your own personal gamer tag so that you can earn Bitcoin on all of Zebedee's games on mobile and desktop. It's never been more fun to earn Bitcoin, and Zebedee is your key to it all. To claim your personal gamer tag and start earning some Bitcoin of your own, download the Zebedee app today. Paolo, in February, you announced on Twitter that Bitfinex had processed 10,000 Lightning transactions in the last 30 days for about 100 Bitcoin of volume. Have you noticed any meaningful changes in Lightning activity through Bitfinex?
I can easily say that they are more than double as of today. The size of the network, the amount of Bitcoin locked has gone higher over the last few months. And we are seeing actually more and more users excited about Lightning payments. We also had that to the Bitfinex app. We have Fast Pay, that is a Lightning first approach to send the payments from our Lightning node from your Bitfinex account, and people are usually using that to pay for, like in El Salvador, or like paying for groceries in the shops that are using it. So it's super exciting.
Very cool. Is Bitfinex earning from their routing node right now? And if so, do you suspect that routing fees or channel liquidity, like buying and selling liquidity, will be a bigger source of revenue for Bitfinex?
Okay, this is a tricky one. I don't want to give an unpolite answer, but I don't think routing will be a money driver for the Lightning Network. I think that it will be always negligible. I think that liquidity is always there. I mean, we are a good provider of liquidity in the Lightning world. We have two nodes averaging 350 Bitcoin each. So we are a good example of not interested to make fees in routing. I believe that the amount of fees that you can make in routing will remain negligible for the foreseeable future, and especially the number of hops will be as limited as possible. There will be some sort of centralization with also in Lightning hubs, so that will reduce the necessity of doing routing. So I don't know. It feels to me that is making money on routing is a little bit far-fetched at this point.
Do you think that selling channel liquidity will also be a low source of revenue, or do you think that could complement routing fees?
I think that could complement routing fees. It's definitely a more interesting business model to me. I know that John is really looking too deep and actually is betting heavily on that, and I believe that that is the right bet.
Got it. Okay, how much stablecoin payment volume will be happening on Lightning in a decade?
That's tricky. I believe that we're going to see around 100 million transactions per second in a decade, because for all the IoT stuff that will happen. Again, next. If you have seen the video from Boston Dynamics, where the guy, the robot that was doing like backflips and so on, I mean, you can imagine that in 10 years, this thing will teach at universities and will pay for the bus ticket in order to get back home, right, somewhere in some pod. So I think that we are, and machines are much faster than us, much smarter than us, will be much smarter than us, and so on and so forth, right? So I feel like it's going to be an enormous amount of transaction per second. I think that so just to be clear, Tether is not better than Bitcoin. Absolutely, Bitcoin is better than anything else. It's just that Tether offer a short-term low volatility compared to Bitcoin, and that is in a way, if you are like a computer, would probably like the predictability of or you are an AI, you would like to see the predictability of the payments that you are doing, and hence you might prefer for the short term to use a stable coin. And again, I'm not enjoying that. I believe that the long term should be Bitcoin first, but this is my 2 cents on this specific matter.
So that's my follow-up question. In a decade, if you have 100 million transactions a second, we have a ton of volume going through, what percentage of that volume is dollars versus Bitcoin in a decade?
I would hope that is 70% Bitcoin.
Okay, I like it. If you could change one thing about Bitcoin, what would you change?
Matthias, you want to go first on this one?
I would just more like, I'm just gonna chill our own things. I would say like stop putting everything on blockchains in general and like use the data structures that matter. Like blockchains are great for financial stuff. Bitcoin is a great example of that, but especially other blockchains, there's too much stuff happening. Decentralize the rest.
I think that the things that, for me, the things that in general, not that I personally don't like, but the things that the things for which Bitcoin is most criticized are the things that are making it stronger. So in a way, all the last bit of problems or that are raised on or against Bitcoin are the things that are making it inherently stronger as a monetary system. Matthias is right. Bitcoin is not made. It's fun. Like you have the other flavors of Bitcoin like SV that pretend that they want to do Holepunch just with big blocks, right? You have like the terabyte block on Bitcoin SV. That is, I'm sure that I didn't ever met Satoshi, but I'm sure that Satoshi didn't have in mind to have 1 terabyte blocks, right? So that is from any computer scientist is pure craziness. So
right. Okay, I want to finish off with a book recommendation. Can you each share a book that has meaningfully changed your view of the world?
I think I mentioned it. Is like The Cathedral and Bazaar from Eric S. Raymond.
I haven't heard that one. I'll give that one a read.
I really enjoyed there's this amazing book on append-only locks about how the Kafka system works, and that kind of changed my perspective on decentralized systems. That's more on the techie side. I'm sorry, I'm a big nerd, but and it's very thin, which I like.
What was the name of it?
It's called Append-only locks, and it's about the Kafka system, which is a decentralized system, but very, 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 very educational and to the point book. But Paolo's is more inspirational. You should definitely read that one. I read that one also in school. Really good book.
It was basically related to, if I'm not wrong, like the kernel wars, right? So you had like Linux that was actually the pretty monolithic system, right? So then you have Minix, or you have like GNU board built by Stallman and others, that was all about microservices, even at the kernel level. That is basically a peer-to-peer at the kernel level. It's pretty cool, right? In an operative system.
But actually, it was a requirement when I went to university that we read that book, the Bazaar and the Cathedral. We got graded in. But also, I just want to say, if you ever look at great peer-to-peer systems, there's a heavy distribution of them in the Nordics, where I'm from, because people love peer-to-peer up here, because we're small countries and we get locked off from the world a lot. So we're all about small networks. But I'm sure that's part of it also, is all through the system.
But you have been historically traders, right? So in the Nordics, So traders are bazaars are like you send ships around the world and you buy stuff. You buy stuff you can sell, like silk, cotton. You and it's how you should be.
Yeah,
I like it. One final thing before we go, where can listeners go to learn more about the work you guys are doing?
So we have a website, Keet.io. You can go there, get the app. We link to our Discord there, where we're very active, both me and Paolo and the rest of the team. Also, we're very active talking about the stuff on Twitter until we get our decentralized alternatives, hopefully in the future. But I think that's the best ways to catch up.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time, both of you. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure listeners will too. Hope we can do it again soon.
Thank you very much, Kevin.
In the last 7 days, you guys have sent in 20,831 sats. That came in from 41 different supporters. Thank you to everyone sending in sats. Let's go through the top 5 supporters of the week. We have an anonymous user on Breeze who sent in 10,952 sats. RGBTC sent in 2,450. Mary Oscar sent in 1,958. Max Webster sent in 1,699. And Gui Porto sent in 425 sats. And we got a lot of questions, a lot of comments. Let's roll through them here. First one is from SMRTAK. It says, thanks for a great lesson again on episode 58 with Alan Plus. Maitoshi sent in 7,000 sats from Breeze. I guess this is the anonymous user from Breeze. Said, love the show with Alan on episode 58. Thank you, Maitoshi. RGBTC says, buy yourself a nice dinner of bugs and mac and cheese with these sats. Sent in 2,450 sats. I hate to tell you, RGBTC, it may cost a little more for mac and cheese these days. 2,450 sats is about 50 cents. So, inflation's got mac and cheese at $2 or $3. So you can send the balance this time. Thank you for the sats. Uncopyable says, I think this is a good thing to listen to other people on episode 57 with Christian Decker. I agree. I think it's great to listen to other people. I don't really know what the comment was referencing, but great idea. Zaya Cry says, thanks, Alan, for creating LN Plus, streamlining the whole process by having an API and having an app on Umbrel and Embassy will bring it to another new level. Kevin, thanks for creating this content. I enjoyed your show. Thank you, Zaya Cry, and I'm really excited about this API. I had no idea until we got into the recording. Alan announced it on the show live, and I can't wait to see the impact of it being out in the wild. Money Minter says, great podcast on LN in response to episode 58. And one says, Alan Plus builds LN Plus. Sounds like the perfect naming. I agree. It's a great platform, by the way. Thank you both for the episode. Thank you, and one for the sats. Purple Panda says, yay for single balance. I don't know what that means. In response to episode 57 with Christian Decker. But thank you for the sats anyways, Purple Panda. DCW says, one of the good things of Bitcoin is that it makes people start to think about the nature of money, what it is and who creates it. Many things that until then had not been questioned because the system had made them implicit. They have made us play in their field with their rules, but they have not explained what it is, what is behind it, or how they manage it. I agree, that's a great thing about Bitcoin. Thank you for the thoughtful comment, DCW. This was in response to episode 48 with Michael Levine. We got into the nature of money in that episode a little bit, so check that one out if you have not listened to it. It's one of the most popular ones I've done to date. DCW says, in response to episode 1 with Oscar Mary, this is the episode that started this entire podcast, DCW says, Fountain Podcast is a very good initiative. Let's change the rules. Let's promote and boost value for value. Let's create new business models that reward individuals and creators. Good luck. Thank you, DCW. It's working so far. It's, we're in the early innings, but I'm seeing every single month, 100,000 plus sats come in. It's starting to become a meaningful contributor. I appreciate every listener sending in comments, sending in sats, whatever you think the show is worth. You guys can decide for yourselves, and we'll see. I think this value for value thing has legs, and it's starting to be replicated outside of podcasting into news, social media. I think this is going to become a common theme throughout the internet economy, the creator economy over time. So thank you guys for sending in all those comments. I can't wait to see what you guys send in this week. See you in a couple days.